right. It looks like we're all set up for the video recording. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm really grateful that you're all still coming out and interested in some of these nutrition topics. We have been doing this for quite some time together, almost going on a year. And about February, we talked a little bit about blood sugar. So what I wanted to do is expand on that topic and answer a little bit more questions about how to eat with diabetes in the dining room. What are some strategies we can look at? What are some different ways of approaching the Speranza line? And I'm hoping that by the end of this conversation, we will look at some myths that I have heard from people talking about different items that are available on the line. And I hope to shed new light on how to look at some of the offerings, how to put them together, and hopefully you will hear something new. I will also talk a little bit about the blood sugar curves, flattening the glucose curve from the glucose goddess. So at the end, I pulled some of my favorite images from her work. So if you're familiar with that, we're going to touch on it as well. All right, let's get started. Eating with diabetes. I want to start by telling you a little story about what I think food is. I don't know if you've ever wondered about how or what food is to our bodies. Of course, the obvious thing, first of all, is that it nourishes us and it provides us with nutrients. But I think it's so much more than that. One of the newest developing fields in nutritional science is something called nutrigenomics. Has anybody ever heard of nutrigenomics? I might have mentioned it briefly once or twice. Nutrigenomics, nutrigenetics, epigenetics. And what this field of study does, which is very, very exciting, is at first we had no idea what the building blocks of DNA were. We deciphered that and we sequenced the human genome. And then we figured out all these different things about the body. Then the next step was, well, how do things from the outside coming in affect the body? Well, one of those things is the food that we eat every day, right? But we all of a sudden found out that the food that we eat is actually talking to our DNA, right? So when I heard that, I thought to myself, well, what does that mean? If I'm eating something, like if it's a carrot or if it's carrot cake, it's talking to my DNA? What? What that means is that every single thing that's coming into the body that's stimuli, like conversations, information, different things in the environment, the air, and what you eat, it's all coming in and it's all talking to your body. Kind of makes sense. When we're eating, we want to provide our body with nutrients, and that's kind of the image I have up here. It's all of these different words representing information. Food is actually information, but it's information that only DNA, your body, can decipher. So are all things edible? No, right? You can't just go outside and eat whatever might appear interesting. There's a lot of plants out there that look beautiful, right? Maybe some of our house plants, some of the beautiful succulents I see at some of your cottages, all the beautiful greenery around. We can't eat that, right? Most of it is probably poisonous. So the question then becomes, what is food? Food is information, but what information is it providing? It's providing certain nutrients, and those nutrients are actually talking to your DNA. And they're telling your body to produce more of the things like protein, collagen, to make you look beautiful and young, right? It's telling your bones to be either harder or softer, depending on what's happening. It's talking to sunshine. It's getting the signals from the sun, from the air, everything. So food talks to your DNA. How cool is that? Which also means that depending on the food that you pick, it can influence your DNA. So the reason they call it epigenetics, epi is on top of. So on top of the genetic profile, so whatever DNA you have, any of these signals are creating a new signal like on top of it. It's producing new information in your body. It's very exciting, very interesting. Now, what will continue to happen in the future is we will start to figure out how to talk to your DNA specifically, because we're all different. So you'll have something called personalized nutrition and personalized lifestyle medicine, and this will all be based on your DNA. Is anybody like me kind of freaked out that somebody's going to look at my DNA and tell me what's going on in there? Anybody? Right? It's exciting, maybe a little scary too, because medicine and doctors, they will know so much more about us. They already know a lot of things about different gene sequences, right? Some create disease and some create health. And ultimately, the goal in the future will be to figure out, does everybody need yogurt? In what quantities? And does it make some people feel good? Because it's a healthy food, right? We talk about Greek yogurt all the time. Great protein, calcium, all kinds of stuff. But we will in the future find out that not everybody benefits from yogurt, even though it's a healthy food. So why do I tell you this story? I want to tell you this because one of the main things about controlling diabetes and blood sugar is what you eat, how you eat it, and in what sequence you're eating it. A lot of these factors are creating a poem or a story. So your story here, the information that you're getting from food, it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you tell the story out of sequence, if you eat nutrients out of sequence, then it's going to create a signal in your body that does not make as much sense. Or if you have an incomplete story, you have no beginning, maybe you missed the middle, maybe you don't have the end. It means that your body is missing the signal and it can no longer produce the right amount of nutrients, protein, or whatever it may be in your body. So the story that we're telling here is of what are the different things that you can eat that will help to manage your blood sugar, make you feel happy and not sad, because I'm not going to tell you not to eat a lot of sweets and desserts. What we're going to do is rearrange your plate. So it's what you eat, how you eat it, right? And the sequence that you're eating it in. And that will ultimately make all the difference. So the story we want to tell is a good one. We want to tell a story of being healthier, right? We want to enjoy our lives, but it doesn't mean that we can only eat sugars, right? Or desserts or sugar-free desserts or whatever it might be. We need those signals. We need that information. So that is my story for today. How exciting is that? So much to learn all the time, right? So food is information. I just popped in this image. So this idea of personalized nutrition, as I said, is cutting edge. And it will take a look in many different factors, but this is just a visual. You don't have it in there because I just found it 2 minutes before we started the talk. But ultimately, it's just kind of showing you in image form what I finished telling you. The idea being that you are an individual person. And if I tell you that broccoli is healthy for you and you need to eat more of it, but you can't digest it, or it makes you feel funny or off or whatever the case is, it doesn't mean that you should eat it. But what it does mean is that every single person here has to find the right foods for them. And that's really the journey that we're on here, right? Hopefully, the different menu offerings that we have here are to your liking, but also interesting, that you get the variety that you need and ultimately can find the things that work for you. Because what works for me, like for example, I love zucchini, but if I eat too much of it, I can't digest it. But it's low calorie, great fiber, great water content, all kinds of nutrients and minerals and all kinds of great stuff in there. It's filling, it's delicious, especially in the summer, but I can't eat a lot of it or I feel sick. So I don't want to have the message be that you have to eat a certain food. We're going to talk about the categories of foods, and then it'll be up to us to find the things that work for us. And the good news is that there's lots of variety, and that's what we'll talk about. All right. So here is the common myth that I often will hear from people, especially those who may have been diagnosed with diabetes a while ago, or maybe you're pre-diabetic. I'm picking this one. There's a lot of different myths probably, but I'm going to focus on this and sort of build the talk around this concept, which is food being information. And if every piece of food that we eat is a signal or a story or information that's coming in, what is the difference between a carrot, which is a starchy vegetable, right? One of the main myths that I hear is, well, I can't eat corn, I can't eat peas, and I can't eat carrots. And that's if they're steamed, right? So if I jazz it up for you a little bit, we have some orange glazed carrots. You're going to look at me, not you specifically, but people look at me and they say, I can't eat that, I'm diabetic. So that will then eliminate a lot of your choices, right? And you'll go to the dining room and you'll say to me, Anetta, I can't eat anything because I'm trying to watch my blood sugar and I can't eat carrots. That is the number one thing that I hear, kind of, is this idea that starchy veggies are really unhealthy for us, and that's the thing we should watch out for. So if I look at that as the primary myth, what I want to share with you about that is that carrots are a complete story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The information contained in a singular carrot is actually, by comparison, it's a millionfold more information in a single carrot than, let's say, if I make a carrot cake. It's going to be a refined product, and the way that it's made with the processing and putting it together, it is incredibly delicious, right? If you were at my last talk, you have heard me talk about bliss point. Baked goods will absolutely achieve the bliss point for everybody, no matter who eats them. We are not really capable of saying no to carrot cake. But carrot cake does not have the same information in it as does a singular carrot. So if I were to compare, for example, so you'll say, well, I can't really eat starchy veggies. And I'll say, okay, but starchy vegetables, if we look at just a carrot, for example, one carrot about is going to be maybe 25 to 30 calories, only 7 grams of carbohydrates, which is the thing that we're all watching if we're mindful of our blood sugar, versus a carrot cake, one slice, which has 360 calories, 42 grams of carbs. Where did they all come from? The flour, probably. And the added sugars, exactly. So as you can tell, and I did the calculation, well, actually, no, I tasked my intern with finding this information. But basically, you would have to eat 16 whole carrots in order to equal one slice of cake. So they couldn't possibly be equivalent, could they? The reason I point this out is if you're going on the buffet line and you see my glazed carrots, even if they're glazed, and you get a serving size, which is only half a cup, which is, about how much would fit in your palm, even that is not enough for it to really register as something that is unhealthy for you. Whereas the carrot cake, even if you have half a slice, you can already see that it's not going to amount to the same amount of calories and carbs. So why do I say all that? Who here could eat 16 carrots in one sitting? Nobody. And this is not an invitation. Please don't call me later and say, Annette, I tried 16 carrots and I ate it and now I feel terrible and sick. Because that's probably what would happen. That is way too many carrots, right? The only way you can get 16 carrots is if you do what? You juice them. But then what happens? You take out the fiber. So even though carrot juice is, if it's fresh pressed, is still healthier for you than, let's say, a processed juice that's been sitting on the shelf a long time, and has been pasteurized and all these other things have been done to it for freshness, etc. It's still not the same thing. Nobody can eat 16 carrots. Nobody. So what that ultimately means is that all of the starchy vegetables that I've heard some of you worry about in terms of carbohydrates, they're really, in comparison to other foods, not very much at all. But what do they have that we all need? They have all the vitamins, they have the minerals, and they have the fiber, which is ultimately the thing that will help to control your blood sugars. So Mother Nature is infinitely genius, creating foods that are plant-based, that have everything inside of them, that full informational package that will ultimately help to control your blood sugar, because all the starchy veggies also have fiber in them. What do you all think about that? Right? Nobody's going to eat this many carrots. Nobody's going to eat a pound of peas. Nobody's going to eat a lot of corn. Those items are really, in the grand scheme of things, not much to worry about. We can do so many other things in order to maintain our blood sugars. So who here is going to go on the line today and eat a bunch of carrots? No? Any takers? Carrots are so good for you. And they have all the other things that are good for eyesight, your skin. I mean, so many different things. And just to answer the question, if it's like a glazed carrot, for example, in a serving size, if you're just having half a cup, right, which is a normal serving size, it would be about a teaspoon of whatever that glaze is. And it's all made in house. It's made from scratch. So ultimately, it's still not as bad for you, quote unquote. I don't like to call things good or bad, but ultimately, it's not the same as the carrot cake, even though it has carrots in it. I couldn't have tricked you with that one, could I? All right. And then just for comparison, the peas, which I do put on the menu because I do want variety, because every vegetable is going to have its own story that it's telling, its own information it's carrying. Steamed peas only have 29 calories and 5 grams of carbs. Really insignificant compared to the bigger picture, which is managing your blood sugar. So it's not going to be the peas, the corn, or the starchy veggies that are going to do you in. I promise. I promise. All right. So hopefully I busted that common myth that I have heard. Who here has heard about the veggie starch thing, right? I feel like that is very common that people have heard, is stay away from the starchy vegetables, and that's just simply not true. And that will cut so many options from your day, and I don't want that to be the case for you. I want you to enjoy the veggies. So the focus areas for blood sugar management are ultimately so that you can have healthy aging, because blood sugar, if it's spiking, then it's going to contribute to different damage to blood vessels, etc. And even those who do not have diabetes as a diagnosis, it's estimated maybe about 80% of people, just by how they're eating, are spiking their blood sugar. So really, because of the food supply and culturally how things have changed, the way we're eating fast food, convenience food, we're all spiking our blood sugars. So even if you don't have the diagnosis, controlling blood sugar is incredibly important. So what we'll be looking at is blood sugar, if it is not controlled, and the way that it wouldn't be controlled is if we're eating foods that are out of proportion with each other, if they're out of sequence with how you're eating them, or if you're eating too much of a good thing. Too much of a good thing is still going to be too much, right? So again, just really quickly, let's take a look at your normal glucose curve. What helps blood sugar from entering the bloodstream very, very quickly is going to be things like healthy fats, protein or fiber, and the fiber is found in all veggies, leafy greens, starchy vegetables, it doesn't really matter. And then you're also going to have some in whole grains. But basically what we're looking at is, if you're looking on the top right, you see two curves, one in red and one in blue. And it's just showing that if you have the diagnosis of diabetes, then you are chronically higher in your blood sugars, but you're still following the curve, which is you eat something, your blood sugar goes up, and it just takes a little bit longer for it to come down, and it might not 100% come down. And then the blue, which is what they call a healthy or normal adult range, is going to be lower. But as you notice, the spike is still there. That's normal. That's how the food gets digested and the blood sugar gets into your bloodstream. So all of that is normal. What is not normal is staying up high and very high for longer and not having the curve come down quickly enough. And the strategies that we're going to talk about help to, as I've heard it said, flatten the glucose curve. And that's the goal. The goal is to eat in such a way as to not have those spikes and give you enough fiber, protein, and healthy fats to maintain your overall health. So that's the goal. And then the bottom right graph just shows you that anytime you're eating, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, which is not included in the image, but snacks as well, anytime you eat, blood sugar goes up and it comes down. And that's how it's meant to work. And then, of course, the benefits of maintaining healthy blood sugars are all the ones that we want, which is healthy aging, reduced cognitive decline, less cancer risk, better health, sleeping better, better energy, and then better immune responses to infections, because high blood sugars can prevent wound healing and other types of healing as well. So all of these are very, very important. So let's take a look. All of this in mind, the menu is designed in a very, very specific way. So when you go to Speranza, you will see that it is always, always, always created in a very specific order. We provide you different menu offerings so that it's a complete menu offering, and it's in an effort to provide different varieties of foods in different forms, right? I love soups. I am much more likely to have a protein in a soup and maybe a salad. That would be my preference. But not everybody likes soups. Some people are more like meat and potatoes people. Some people don't really like salads as much. So the idea here is that you wouldn't eat every single food in every single category, but they are set up to provide soup, salad, main entree, and then you have your alternate. The alternate we endeavor to make less starchy or carby, and that was as a response to some of the feedback we received. So we want to give those folks who want more like comfort food or more of a richer entree. And then the second will almost always be something that is lighter. I do want to just point out one more thing. Remember our example with the carrots versus the carrot cake? I do want to mention also, even though breaded items, I want to make a distinction between two kinds of breaded food items. So for example, today we had the fried breaded cod. Did anybody try that? You probably might go for dinner and try it. So there is a difference between, let's say, if I take a chicken breast cutlet and I flour it a little bit, and then they're either baking it or maybe they're frying it, versus deep frying the fish, which has the breading. Anything that's deep fried is going to be infinitely less healthy. And that is because of the frying process itself. But if you're comparing it to, let's say, a chicken breast, which is a very, very lean cut of meat, which is really healthy for you, and it's slightly floured, maybe it has a roux on it to give it more of a sauce, per serving, you're still going to have less impact. So on the days that, for example, you want to try a breaded something, not the fried, which I will never recommend anything fried. But if you were to then have the breaded, floured, or sauced chicken breast, then you would just perhaps omit either the bread roll, right? Or you would omit the dessert for the day, and that's how you would stay within range. It doesn't mean that if there's an entree that has a little bit of flour or some kind of sauce on it, that it is something you cannot have. And I just want to make that distinction, because that is one of the most common things that I hear from you all, is when choosing things on the line. You might look at a slightly floured cut of meat, which is a very high quality piece of meat. Maybe it's lower in fat as well, like a chicken breast or something like that. And then you will say you can't have it because it has a lot of carbs in it. But if you look at just the serving size and the carbs in that, you are still okay to have that, because then you would have your veggies, and then you might compensate by not having maybe a piece of dinner roll for it. So that is the best way to manage that, because then otherwise you're cutting out options that you normally could have as part of your normal healthy diet. So that's your main entree number one, and then the alternate, which is typically going to be a lighter fare. And then there's always going to be a starch. And as you probably know, there's not a lot of variety in starches. We just have our favorites, right? Potatoes, rice, pasta, pilaf. And then we remix that based on what the dishes are so that we give you the starch that goes with it. But typically, the starch category is pretty set, it's always going to be there. And that is the one that you can play around with the most, because depending on what your entree is, you would then decide what starch you're going to have. Then I always have two veggie choices. And the vegetable, the first one, we're going to jazz it up a little bit because flavor, right? There's only so many steamed peas you can have. And then the alternate veggie is going to be something lighter. It is usually something that is steamed. And that was also something that a lot of residents asked for. So that's how it's set up for those items. And then there's always going to be a bread. 2 days of the week, it's going to be a whole grain bread, which is the 7 grain bread. And I've still heard a lot of really good reviews. Do you all still like the 7 grain? It's good, right? So then you're going to have that choice twice a week as well. And then dessert. The dessert will always be there, which is great and terrible at the same time, because if you're watching your blood sugar and you see a dessert that you love, it's tough, right? So here is my solution for that. You want to have dessert, don't you? Right? We all want to be able to enjoy the dessert, and it's perfectly fine, but you can't have 3, what I'm going to call carbs in one meal period, right? So it's either going to be the starch. So it's either the mashed potatoes or the dessert, or it's going to be the bread roll. If it's all 3, then it's not going to work, right? And just in terms of really healthy eating, that's the way you want to think about it. One thing that I often hear is that somebody might want to cut out all carbs altogether. There is a time and a place for that, and it's really important. Let's say you're really high in blood sugars in the 300 range, and maybe your A1C is very high. That's when we would cut your carbs to 30 grams or 45 per meal period. Just to give you a reference, an apple is about 30 grams of carbs, right? So, but an apple is going to have fiber and other things in it. So in general, the best way to manage blood sugar is going to choose your favorite carb. Whose favorite carb is going to be a savory carb? Like a mashed potato, rice pilaf, pasta. Who's going to choose that over dessert? Yes, ma'am, in the back. You're going to choose a savory carb. Or maybe you'll want that 7-grain bread with some butter, right? Maybe you're a savory person. Who here is going to choose the sweet carb? Who's going to go for that dessert? Yes. Raise your hand. Your friend said raise your hand. All right. So that's how it's going to work. The menu offerings are always going to be there. And that is, yes, to entice you, but to also show you variety. Over the course of the week, not everybody's going to like every single kind of dessert. So the idea is going to be, if you love a certain dessert on that day, you're going to choose something that's going to be lighter in the carbs. And that is a really best practice and a really great way to manage blood sugars. But the offerings are there so that you have the greatest way to optimize what you like, because we want to honor your food preferences ultimately. So this is the Speranza menu. This does not include bistro, which, as you hear me often say, bistro is fun food, but I also give you healthy food. So in the bistro, you can do things like the egg salad, tuna salad, chicken salad, or not chicken salad, the Asian chicken salad. So there's different really healthy options there. There's always a fruit cup, hard-boiled egg. There is going to be a parfait, but then of course sandy sweets. So you really can't get away, can you? And then if we're looking at the regular menu, there's going to be a lot more sort of fried options, more of those fun food kind of options. So those items I would typically recommend, if you're watching your blood sugars, you want to do less of 2 to 3 times a week. Ultimately, the Speranza line is made from scratch, sort of homemade kind of meal. It's meant to be that way. You're meant to eat the peas. You're meant to eat the carrots, right? You're meant to eat the broccoli. So it's really designed with that in mind. And then the main entrees are also designed in that way, because you want your lean proteins, your healthier proteins, pork, beef, those kinds of things, because they have the information that you ultimately need. That kind of information in the food is not going to be carried the same way if you're going to the bistro and having a flatbread, no matter how delicious it is, right? So that is what we are choosing. We're choosing the right information from the food for us. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the question is basically about the entrees and the structure of them. I had made the comment that we make every effort to make the first entree sort of more of a richer, fancier option. And then the second, we'll try to make a little bit of a lighter fare, maybe not sauced as heavily, or maybe the sauce on the side. Now, that's a really great question because if you're looking at the image here, you might notice that I had fried cod today for the second, and then maybe the next day you had the enchiladas, you have the Italian sausage. So they're kind of flipped. So it has to do with how I do the menu planning for the nutrient analysis part of it. So sometimes they're flipped, but I do try to give you whichever option comes up, the second option to be a little bit lighter. And it doesn't always work out because I still have to make sure the menu is making sense. So that's the answer to that question. Yes. Mhm. 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 So the question in the front from Carol, or the comment, is that she is in the category of where you have to monitor carbs at a specific amount. And I mentioned earlier that a normal range of carbohydrate intake for a meal is actually 60 grams of carbohydrate, and that's considered very normal. Within that 60, you can make all of the menu offerings that we have work. In instances where you have to really manage it and you go to a very low number, like 30, for example, for context, 30 grams of carbs is what is in an apple about, or one banana. And so what Carol is saying is if she's looking at the nutrient analysis, which you all have access to, you can get it on Cubigo. And I have recently been putting it also by the doorway into the Speranza on the left side. I'm now printing it out for you as well so you can see it easily. But essentially what she's saying is one menu item, like a casserole or an enchilada, those are actually for 6-ounce portions. So actually you can do a smaller portion and meet the restrictions. But the comment is if you're watching it for 30 carbs, let's say if your doctor told you or you're trying to hit a certain goal, then it's going to be a little harder. And in that case, I would say we need to have a conversation together as to how to adjust the portion sizes. And that's really the only way to do it. But then that also means you have to increase your protein intakes and probably your non-starchy veggies, because 30 is a very low number. 60 is where is the average sort of general healthy intake that you want to be at. And that would be perfectly normal. Hopefully that answers the question, but I would say in that case, what you want to do is you want to play around with the portion sizes, which I have images of that. So I was going to take you through the modifiers, but I think it makes sense. You've seen the salad bar. I'll answer that question a little bit more, but what I want to say is in order to watch the carbs, you want to then eliminate anything that has a carb in it. The best way to do it is leafy greens, which have negative net carbs for the purposes of this discussion. And then you have your proteins that are unaltered. So you have all the different protein offerings like the egg, the fish, the beef, whatever it is, the little chicken. You would want to then go here because it has almost no carbs. Then you have your leafy greens to modify, and then you have all of these veggies to modify. You have chickpeas. Now, Who here wants to guess? Are chickpeas really high in carbs or low? Is hummus a healthy food for someone who is wanting to minimize carb intake? That is a hidden food that people will often think that they're doing something very, very healthy, but then they end up eating a lot because hummus is delicious. So then you end up eating the whole package, and then you wonder why things aren't working out quite the way that they're supposed to. That's probably why. On the flip side, if you wanted to gain weight, you could eat a bunch of hummus and lots of yogurt, full fat, lots of ice cream, right? Then you have some of these other modifiers. So things like beans, chickpeas, things like that, you would want to stay away from. You would have to then do a lot of leafy greens. So all these modifiers are meant to help you reach your goal. If you have a specific number in mind, this would be one of the ways that you could hit it realistically every single meal period. Which brings me to my favorite image. And if you've come to see me before, you have seen it. It essentially helps to break the plate into quarters. And the reason we do this is because if you eliminate any of these items, what happens invariably, maybe it doesn't happen today, maybe it won't happen tomorrow, but ultimately, if you omit any of the quarters on this plate, you will end up wanting dessert somewhere down the line. Because your body is looking for specific information, right? There is a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you just told your body that the middle is missing, and now the story doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And the body will try to make up for that missing information in one way or another. Now, unfortunately, it will want to do it probably with something salty, and fatty. So you might be the savory snacker, or you might want all the mashed potatoes, or you'll want the creamy stuff, or pastas, or you're the sweets person, and then the way your body's trying to make up for the missing information is through sweets. So then you'll do cookies and ice cream, and then you'll want to do pies and cakes, right? That's the unfortunate part of missing the information. So if food is information, you would be able to manage your blood sugar and your feeling of well-being and satisfaction if you put one of everything on your plate. Now, what that means is, can you do a dinner roll, a starchy entree, let's say an orange, right? Because that's healthy. And then dessert. Could you do all four in a meal? No, you couldn't, because then that's too much of a good thing. The reason I want to mention that is because ultimately we all want to enjoy some of these offerings, right? We just have to be mindful in what quantity and in what arrangement. Now, the thing that's going to save our blood sugars the most is fiber. And where is the fiber? It's in the kale. So you just have to eat kale and every problem will be solved, right? Right? Have I convinced you yet? This joke never gets old for me. I enjoy it. Thank you for humoring me. So basically, we have to find the part of the story that's going to fill your fiber intake. So that's all of your vegetables. You can even do this with a starchy vegetable. So hopefully from the beginning of the talk, I have given you evidence and convinced you that you can choose any veggie you want as long as it's in this proportion, right? Now, who's going to eat a whole cup of peas to make this work? Because this is half a cup of everything, which happens to be the serving size of all of our offerings. No takers? All right, so you'll probably go to the salad bar and you'll modify, or you'll have a favorite veggie, right? Maybe it's broccoli, maybe it's something else. But the idea is you have to put it on half the plate because that's the only signal strong enough to give you the appropriate nutrients that you need so that you then can only willingly choose one starch that you enjoy, right? So maybe it's mashed potatoes today, and then for dinner, you're gonna have the dessert. And then the next day, maybe you will do something else. And for dinner, you will choose the other option. And that's really how it's meant to work. So let me show you some examples of this. So this is from Speranza line, and I wanted to show you how to modify a pork chop 3 different ways. So if you look at it, it's meant to follow the quarter plate method and just to show you what the appropriate volume of food actually is. Does this look like a really big plate to any of you? You're probably like, oh my God, I can't eat all that. But then somehow we still end up eating that volume, but the volume will be equivalent to a slice of cake, or it'll be ice cream or something else. Not to knock it, I just want to say that you will end up eating that amount of food, that amount of information, regardless of what the food source is. The only way to not eat a lot of desserts or those other kinds of starches is if you eat the full plate of that stuff. So here you have the pork chop, and then we went to the salad bar and we did, and this is only, it's a half a cup, so it's about as much as fits in your palm. So it looks like a lot of food, but it's also not as much as you think, but this is actually what you need. So I put a little bit of salad, and I had the green beans, and then I had the rice. So this is a balanced plate. Is anybody surprised by this? So that's really the ratio that you would want to strive for if you're really watching your blood sugars. If there's not enough fiber, your blood sugars will go up regardless of if you're eating a healthy carb. So let's look at the second option. There was also carrots on the line. So for that, I did carrots and green beans and the starch, and I'm still getting fiber. I'm still getting nutrients. Is it a little bit starchier and carbier? Yeah. But you're still getting the nutrients that you need, and you'll feel fuller and more satisfied. Let's look at option number 3. I then modified it with, I think this is a Caesar salad, which was the salad of the day. So I have the pork chop, the Caesar salad, I have some carrots, and I have the rice. Now, again, a little bit starchier, but it's still much healthier than if you didn't do any veggies at all. Let's look at another one. So then we had pulled pork. As you can see, I didn't use the bun. I opted for something that I like more, which is more the mashed potato, or it could be polenta. Please forgive me, I can't remember. But in either case, I chose the starch that is not a dinner roll. Then I have cabbage, and then I modified with a little bit of the salad. And the salad is leafy greens, and I even snuck in some mandarin oranges in there. I have some feta and a couple of other goodies in there as well. I think I might have snuck in a craisin or something. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different ways to take the entree and to remix it to how you like it. And if you don't like a particular vegetable, which, let's be honest, we don't all like all the vegetables, and that's okay. The option is to modify, to feel satisfied, have the food that you want, and then have dessert at the end, which we'll get to in just a moment. So just another example, same entree, which is the pulled pork, same starch, cabbage, but then I added, instead of the salad, because not everybody wants salad all the time, maybe especially not in the winter, right? Maybe in the winter, I want more of the heartier veggies. I want the green beans, I want the cabbage. And then I have another one, which is shepherd's pie. If you can still enjoy something like a shepherd's pie, but if you'll notice, it's all about the proportion, because by the time I'm done eating that salad and those green beans, and I'm really savoring the shepherd's pie at the end, then I won't eat as much because the room is already all taken up by the veggies. Right? Sometimes you got to just do that. You got to trick yourself. And then you eat the favorite thing at the end, which also happens to be starchier, carbier, more sugary. But it's meant to be that way. You eat your veggies, greens, proteins, and then you have the starch at the end, and then your blood sugars are very nice and steady, and they come down. It's a beautiful thing. So see, I still had the pot pie, right? So now onwards to the glucose goddess. I picked a couple of images that I really liked. For those of you who don't know her work, she is a biochemist that used data from her own glucose monitor, the one that is a continuous glucose monitor, and she noticed that when she ate foods in a specific sequence, meaning that if she ate veggies first or fruit first or protein first or whatever the food was, and then she alternated the sequence of protein, starch, carb, fat, she found that it had different effects on blood sugar. And then she went on to do more research, and she was able to create these really nice graphs for us. So the main idea of these graphs is I just want to show you that the sequence matters in terms of how much it spikes your blood sugar. We talked about making sure that you're eating enough veggies. What you want to do is do the veggies first, leafy greens. You want to do the protein, then a fat, and then you can do the starches and your favorite things, which are ice cream and pies and all those other great things, which I love them too, by the way. So the way you want to look at these graphs or these images is you're looking at the bell curve or the black part of the image, and we're comparing what happens between when we eat the tuna sandwich as a whole, which is all the food groups together, carb, protein, you have the leafy greens. You see that the black part jumps really high and it spikes. We're not going to worry too much about the numbers on the left-hand side of the image. It's more important to just focus on seeing how the blood sugar goes up and how high. So let's say we ate the tuna salad and then we ate the bread. You can see that the blood sugar behaves differently. And this principle holds true for a lot of foods. So let's take a look. What would happen if you just ate a bowl of spaghetti? It would spike your blood sugar pretty quickly. But if you had salad first and then you enjoyed the spaghetti, which that's the combination that seems to be the best, right? We want to save the best for last. Then it actually has a much lower blood sugar spike and will help you feel more even. And then, of course, it also takes up a little bit more room with the fiber. And then you do end up eating the correct serving size of the starch or the carbohydrate. Let's see. And then if you didn't want to eat a salad, you could do any of the veggies. So if we're thinking about the Speranza line, that would be any of your veggies on the main line, or it could be things that are on the salad bar as well. So you can really jazz that up. Let's take a look at breakfast. Let's just take a look at the curves. For example, the difference between just having a bagel with cream cheese and orange juice, which is a fairly common sort of breakfast choice, versus an omelet with some veggies in it. You can really see that anything that's going to be a bagel or an English muffin or even toast and juice, that is one of the worst combinations for breakfast in terms of how much it spikes your blood sugar. So if I were to recommend anything to someone who is looking to control blood sugars right away, that'll make a really big difference, is to see what you're eating for breakfast. Because in America, we tend to eat more of the sweet breakfast, not as much savory. So we're not used to eating just like the omelet by itself. And then you might ask me, okay, does it matter full eggs or egg whites? We talked about it a while back. Does it matter? Should it matter? Do you have a preference? Who here loves egg white omelets? Oh, okay, great. The recommendation is that you want to eat the full egg because then it has all the right information in it. You get the full complement and benefit of eating that food. So let's take a look at an apple, banana, strawberry smoothie. Now, you might remember from the beginning, we talked about how fruits and vegetables have the right fiber, water, nutrient composition. But what happens if you make a smoothie? You're going to blend that up. You're going to break the cell walls. And what will happen is it will spike your blood sugar very, very fast. So it's the equivalent of drinking juice. Yes, you have the fiber. Yes, it's fresh. But if you're really watching your numbers, then I would not recommend doing this. The only caveat, or not caveat, but the only modifier to this that could work is if you add leafy greens to this smoothie and you do a protein with it and a little bit of healthy fat, then it'll help to stabilize that out. But really, you don't want to blend things. You really want to chew them because there's so many more benefits to doing that than putting it in a smoothie. But if you're on the go and you love these things, then just put some protein powder in there, some leafy greens, and that will work as well. Because ultimately, breakfast is still a better option than no breakfast. So there's always levels. Let's take a look at Special K, cereal. Cereal is another very common food that will spike your blood sugar right away. You can add some modifiers to this. You could add some almonds, or you could add some maybe healthy granola, some berries. That will help a lot. You can do a plant-based milk with protein in it. That will help. But ultimately, if I were to say anything, I would say make sure you're adding a protein for breakfast and eating that first before you have your sweeter breakfast option. And then it continues to kind of show you the different breakfast options. I won't take all the time because I think I'm starting to run out of time. But it's the same story. Breakfast will make a lot of impact on your blood sugars. So make sure you're choosing a high quality protein. And then if you want to do something that's a little bit sweeter, make sure you're doing that at the end. And then, of course, my 2-second plug for making sure that you're exercising. So even taking a walk after you eat will really help to metabolize the sugar that is released from food. So walking is very good. And as you can tell, she was even able to show the data to support this with blood sugars. So you do want to walk it off after. Then we are looking for apple cider vinegar. For those of you who might have a question, who have followed this person's work, they do show that if you have a touch of apple cider vinegar before you eat, whether it's with water, well, you want to dilute it. It's not really tasty if you just take a shot of apple cider vinegar. Any vinegar will work, but what they're showing now, and research is ongoing, that it can help to bring down your blood sugar. The curve will flatten a little bit more, and they're not sure exactly what it is. They're thinking it's the acetic acid in the apple cider vinegar, but they're doing research on this, and other studies have confirmed that this does work. And then let's take a look at snacks. So even though fruit is a really healthy snack in general because of all the information that's in there, and it's about 27 grams of carbs, you still want to make sure that you're snacking with some kind of protein together and a healthy fat. So if you're doing fruit and you're watching your blood sugar, make sure you're never eating any sugary things on an empty stomach. You want to make sure that you have your protein with it. And then the final thing that I will mention is just in terms of how it affects blood sugar specifically is juice and sweetening beverages with any sweeteners, any natural sweeteners. Even if they're the healthiest sweetener on the planet, unfortunately, they all have the same impact on blood sugar. So that is the one thing that I always recommend. Make sure that you're not doing, especially on an empty stomach with nothing else, the juices, and then drinking a lot of sweetened beverages, because that will immediately spike your blood sugars. Which brings me to my final slide, kind of wrapping it all up together to give you the key takeaways for what I think are the top things that you can modify that would have the biggest impact on your blood sugars, which is making sure to reduce or eliminate all sugar sweetened beverages unless you're using your no calorie sweeteners. So stevia is a good one if you're using any of the other sweeteners. From a previous talk, we talked about it, so that's a personal choice. But if you're looking to manage blood glucose levels, then you can use a sweetener, because sometimes you have to have something sweet, right? So you have to make the best choice for you. The second thing would be to limit desserts to 2 to 3 per week. You want to make sure that you're focusing on your protein. So make sure that plate has the protein on it. Increase your veggies and fruits, making sure that you're eating the natural thing, chewing it, putting it in your salads, putting it on the other half of the plate. And then the final thing would be keeping your simple carbs, which is your mashed potatoes, rice, pastas, those kinds of things, to only 1 serving. If you look at the plate, sometimes I've seen people put pasta and it's like the pasta is the whole plate. Have you seen that? I'm not calling anybody out. It's okay if you do that. Just put lots of veggies in it. But in general, if you're really looking to reduce your blood sugars, you want to make sure you just have that 1/4 of the plate as your simple carbohydrate, your rice, rice, pasta, or potato, mashed potato, something like that. Make sure you limit that, because that will really impact your blood sugars as well. And then, of course, if you eat in a certain sequence, it will also give your body different kinds of information. So if you start with your greens, your veggies, protein, grains, then you do your dessert or your fruit, and then you go for a walk, then you would have completed the story from beginning, middle, and end, and your body would have received all of the information that it needs. The story will be complete, and your body will feel much healthier and complete. And that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much. We are coming up to the 4 o'clock mark. I don't know if anybody has any questions for the last couple of minutes. I am wondering if this was a different take for you. I know there's a lot of literature and information on blood sugar and blood sugar management. Was this a little bit different? Did I achieve my goal? I did? Okay. Thank you. Yes, Diane? Yes. The question is, when your blood sugar spikes, what, if anything, does it do to feelings of hunger? And anytime your blood sugar spikes, especially if it goes really, really high, it actually will have multiple effects. It can make you feel more hungry than you really are, but it also will affect your mood. And when your mood is affected, you then also feel hungrier, and then you're more drawn to foods that will make you feel better in the moment, but actually aren't the foods that you really need. So ultimately, it'll make you crave foods more. And that's the thing that will happen if you spike your blood sugars. You'll want to eat more, and especially of the unhealthy things. So that's why the fiber and the volume of the food, that whole plate, how it is, that's why it's so important to have all of those pieces, is for one of those reasons, and that's that. It's preventing the spike from going so high that you then want to eat, several slices of something versus just enjoying a little piece of something or a smaller serving of ice cream or whatever it is. So hopefully that answers the question. Yes, ma'am. The question is about whole grains like brown rice versus more processed or refined grains, which is maybe more of your white rice. In general, they will ultimately have the same impact on your blood sugar, but there will be a little bit of a slowed down effect. So whole grains also have other properties that are healthier for you. They have a little bit more vitamins, minerals, some B vitamins, things like that. So if you're taking off the coating, essentially, the hull, or then what will happen is you just have the starch that's inside, and it'll just hit your bloodstream a little bit faster. So whole grains will slow down that spike. So that's why they're healthier, plus some vitamins and minerals too. So if you can choose between the two, I've had people who hate the brown rice so much so it's okay. You can eat a smaller serving of the white rice, and then some cultures prefer white rice, so that's okay. Where you will make the biggest difference is making sure that you're eating that volume of veggies and getting those vitamins, antioxidants, those colors. Ultimately, that will help to offset those, like white rice versus brown rice, even though brown rice is a little bit healthier. Hopefully that answers the question. And now it's time for dinner. The dinner is the best part of the day. Thank you all so much for coming. If you have any questions beyond that, feel free to pull me aside. I'm always available for questions. I really appreciate you all coming out today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now go enjoy dessert. All right, thank you.